Hello, my name is Dan and welcome to another tutorial experimental type thing for Godot, again with a focus on audio. And right now we're looking at what is the makings of a drum machine type thing based off of timers. Now, I've gone this far and I'm wondering whether or not this is the best way to do it, just because it seems like timers aren't super stable to the point, like they're stable enough for programming, but I wonder if they're stable enough for actual like music type applications, but we'll see. Anyway, this is what I have right now. I just have a kick drum row and it turns on, it turns off with this button right here. You can control the volume. Now I went over how to do smooth volume, and this is pretty smooth volume. You can hear up here a little bit. If you really jerk it around a lot, you get a little bit of the strangeness. And now this tempo, you can make it go faster. Right now I have the max set to 240 and the minimum to 2, so we'll get a beat every 15 seconds. This is BPM, or beats per minute, and each of these are eighth notes. And of course, all importantly, you can change the beat. So if I just wanted like a beat on every quarter note, because these are eighth notes. We could do something like that. And these can all be, of course, updated on the fly, and that's the point of the drum machine. So now I will take you through our scripts, or actually let's take a look at our nodes over here. I have this large sort of folder, it's just a plain node, and here I've placed, this is the audio stream, which is getting the kick sample that we're using, the label, which is just a text label, and then all of these are these buttons that are just the standard Godot buttons. You could theme them any way you like, and there's 16 of them, so that we would have 2 measures of eighth notes. So also the tempo slider, of course, the label. We'll look into that because that's kind of interesting. This is the on-off button. And then the master volume and the volume label, which are similar to the tempo label. So let's take a look at our script. So it's just a 2D node. And we'll go full larger screen on this. And I'll zoom in a little bit. So anyway, these are sort of like scene-wide variables that I found to be useful. The kick array, which is basically what it does is it looks at, or it's storing a value for each of these pads. So as it's going through there, it's checking to see whether or not that pad is, or that button is set to true. Variable X is basically, it's going to be pointing to the various, addresses of the indexes of the arrays. So index 1 will take a look at the kick 1 node. So if I make this small, so index 1 stores the value of this particular button, whether it be true or false, because it's a Boolean, it's a button. All right, so, and then our function process here, every frame that is played updates, every frame kick array updates, it looks at the value stored in all those buttons, and as you can see, there are 16 of them. and x starts at 0, which refers to the first one. That's important. That's just an important programming thing. I could artificially say that x equals 1 and then do some math. But anyway, this is our playback function here. And it just starts running when we hit the run button and it turns to on. That's a default type of button in Godot. So here we make sure that when it is turned on, it sets x to 0. So I can show you really quick, if we didn't set that to 0, well, it's set to 0, so like I don't have a sprite that kind of bounces along. I mean to do that, but I wanted to do this video and that would take long. So anyway, bum, 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 bum. So it starts at the beginning every time. No. Now, if we didn't have that particular value there, or at the beginning of the setting of x to 0 at each one, it would just start wherever we stopped it. So I'm just changing it slightly so you can tell where it's at. Dun, dun, dun. So I stopped it like right around here, and it will start. So it didn't start at 1. If you could hear, you could probably hear that. So anyway, I like it so that it starts at the beginning. So that's what that's there for. And then so I have this variable called running and set to false. Now I do that because there needs to be a variable outside of the function that keeps track of whether or not the button is pressed. Because if we were to just say, this is how I first did it, if we were to take that out of the function and then just set this to, the button is sending an argument whether or not it's pressed, and I figured just doing that would be enough. But it turns out just the way that the programming works, I don't have a computer science degree and I have to find these things out on my own. That makes it so whenever I hit the play button, it restarts, but it doesn't stop playing. So it didn't take me too long to figure that out, but definitely doing these projects, these little projects are very beneficial for me, being so new to code design, basically. So anyway, so this is going to run, this section of the code is going to run whenever running is true, so that whenever that button says on, it will run the loop. So as it cycles through, it's looking at first kick array 0, the index at 0, which is kick 1, whether or not that button is pressed. And if it's true, it plays it. And then it starts a timer. A timer starts here, and the code waits until the timer times out. And we'll get into that more, and that's a function of our tempo. After that happens, I increment x up by 1, and if it's 16, it goes back to 0. That's basically looping from the end of the loop back to the beginning. So then the next step, it'll go back up to the while, top of the while loops, and if running is still true, it will check this, and it will check kick array the index 2, or kick array index 1, actually, which is the second index, because it's starting at 0. Very important to remember. So that is this one, and if we look at it visually, that is that button. So if we make that smaller. It's looking at that, whether or not that node is true. And it does that every time it loops through the script. It checks and it plays it back if it is true. I'm going to rearrange this window just a little bit. So anyway, that is the core playback loop for this drum machine. Now, as you saw, there are some controls, and these are important controls. So this is basically our timer is called tempo. This is our main timer here is tempo. It's wait time. It defaults to 0.5, but on the ready function, which is when the main function is all loaded up, and the main function loads up after all the children are loaded, which is another important thing to keep in mind as far as order of operations. So when everything is ready, it sets the wait time of this this timer to whatever this slider that it is connected to, or that it is connected to abstractly within our code. It just sets it to whatever that is. And the reason I do it that way is that if I choose, so I have the slider, and if I'm looking at it, let's look at this. I can change the value here, and this will just be the value it starts at. Right now I have it at 120. If I want to start it at 80, so I can change that in my view in the just visual editor. Get rid of that. And that will follow that. So that's how it will start. I can change the default setting here in the editor. So that's why I code it that way. And then let's talk about these two variables right here. This is important. There's a very good tutorial on the Godot website, the documents, talking about format strings. And this is how basically you can make a label, give it a label and have it change over time. So that's basically how I get, you can see the numbers change. And that's only one label. I don't have two labels next to each other or anything, which sometimes is the way to do it, I've found in a few things. So basically, in the script, I have the format string that says tempo equals, and then this is the sort of a dissociation right here where it will look for a variable in, and this is basically how you do that. You set the label text equal to your temporary string, and then send it a variable, and this is basically taking an integer and changing it into a string. So anyway, right here. Oh, and as far as tempo goes, 30 divided by the value in BPM, that's the amount of time that will give us eighth notes. So if we listen to that, so we can go up to 240, and I could put a control in here at some point, but if I wanted to have 16th notes, I would do 15 divided by the BPM, and that would give us a time between 16th notes, which are twice as fast. So this is double time. In musical terms, that's what we would call that. All right, that was a little interruption. It was nice. Someone had tea for me, so I appreciate it. So anyway, in double time, basically it's just you would divide it by 15. So I could set this number that I'm typing in, this 30 value, to a variable, and then use various controls in the user interface to half it or change it. I can even set, another slider just to try out different values. But usually you just choose, if you were doing double time, half time, you do this number would be 60. So you would just set the variable to those different numbers. You can use enumerations. There's all sorts of ways to do it. Anyway, these are the controls for, this is the original set controller for our master volume. I went over this a bit in my last video, how to use the audio server, set volumes, and this is again just initializing the label to show the right value so that I can change it in the editor. There's lots of traffic outside right now. But anyway, so here's the actual volume control. If you check my last video, I talk about how to get it to be smooth, and it's pretty smooth. In the last video, the way I was using it, I set this is the weight value. The third argument of this lerp function is the weight. You send the old value, you send the new value, and then you send a weight. And I just find, just through experimentation, that I was using 0.5 before. I found that 0.1 for this particular application sounds better. It just sounds smoother. You get you get less clicks due to digital just jumping in levels. But I may find something better. If anyone does have any suggestions, I very much welcome it. And then this is the update of our string, of our label to show the value. And then here is the mute. If it's all the way at the bottom, it mutes it. And if we play it back, you can barely tell. It already gets so low, you can barely hear it. But if you're playing it loud through a big PA, this may make a difference. So it's completely muted when it's down there. Let's see, do we have anything else to go through? Nope. So what I was going to do, and actually we want this view. What I was actually going to do is to add a snare drum to this so that I can sort of show you part of the process. So to do that, I'm going to take this folder that has all the kick stuff in it. This is going to be a little bit of busy work, but I think it's worth showing. Okay, so now we have kick node 2 and we have all those things. So what I'm going to do is just relabel this. This is going to take a little bit. And I think I may fast forward the video. And actually, this is not right. I need to duplicate it, delete it. I'm not 100% sure I need to duplicate it and delete it. But I'm just going to do that just for... So this is our snare stream. And right now... Whoops, move that. Our snare stream, because we duplicated, it has the kick sample in it, but I have my snare sample over here. I'm going to drag that over. Another way to do this is to hit this down here. We can clear it if we want. And then load. It's in our audio assets and do that. That's another way to do it. And then we have to change all of this. And actually, before we do that, I'm going to grab all of them like this. I hold down Control and select and then just move them up. So that's fine right there. I can always adjust it. And just so it's a little bit more visually makes sense a little bit more visually in case you've skipped forward, I'm going to change this label right away. All right. Oops. Don't press enter when you're entering label text unless you really want to enter another line. All right, so now all of these have to be renamed to snare, and I might as well do a copy paste job just to make it a little quicker. I need a better mouse, and hopefully I'll be able to get one soon. It's a little hard getting electronics at the moment. I'll live, just get through it. And yeah, having a mouse with good high DPI. Oops, I accidentally hit Control C and lost. Also having good normal dexterity is a good thing. But yeah, having a mouse with high DPI is very helpful. This is not a bad mouse. It's not like the cheapest of the cheap, but I have dropped it a few times, and I wonder from time to time whether I have affected it. It is a cheap one, but it's not like Amazon Essentials cheap. Those are cheap. All right, 2 more. Definitely having a good wired mouse as well is, I think, a very positive thing. All right, so those are done. And I think what I'd like to do just while we're doing this busy work is to unpress the ones that we know. Basically, it's going to be like, we're going to have like a default beat so that every time we start up the program, we don't have to like go and okay, we don't want this one. Yeah, basically every time I start up the program, I don't want to have to press a bunch of buttons, and it's just easier to do it now. So every 4th snare drum, we would like that to be on by default. All right, so we're not going to get any sound out of this yet, as we can see. We still just hear the kick, because we need to add that to our scripting. So that's not that hard to do. So in our process function, the function that checks everything, well, first of all, we need our snare array. We need to declare that. And then we need to, I just triple clicked that, and then I'll go to the end of the file, or end of the line rather, of code, press return so that we're tabbed into the same function. It's behaving a little weirdly. There we go. And then set our, actually, we're going to go ahead and just do that. And I've never used this before. That shows how new I am to Godot, I guess. Oh, we need to do that. I'm going to do a find and replace. I don't know how exactly, so I want to find the kicks and replace it with snare. Like that first. And just replace that one. Now here, I definitely want to match the case, or definitely need a, whoops, I was hitting Control S. I need a capitalized, so let's see if that works. Yes, it does. So I just want to hit replace until it hits the end of the line, because we want to look at the snare node, and I haven't named that snare node yet, I don't think. Oh no, I did. And just make sure we're doing it only until the end of the line. And that's not fun, how it goes back like that. So as soon as this one's selected, that's when we need to stop. All right, all right, all right. Right, we're pressing, there we go. And if I just review that line, we can see all those kicks have become snares. And yes, that looks good. So now within here, before, or like basically right after, we need to take this, and we were checking if the kick is on. We need to check to see if each snare hit is on for each. So here we need snare there. And here we need, I'll just type these in. This will be a little quicker for me, I think. Just easy. Snare. All right. As far as I can tell, that should do it. There we go. Okay, so here's an interesting thing I didn't talk about before. And I'll play with that a little more, but I want to talk about the tempo, changing tempo. There's an interesting wrinkle here, which is another reason why I'm not sure that timers are the thing to use to do a project like this. I think something tied to frame rate might be a little bit better. The only problem with that, there's problems inherent with that, but I don't know. Right now, it sounds kind of good. So anyway, whenever I change the tempo, this is whenever the tempo slider changes. I put this line of code in that whenever it changes, it updates everything, and then it restarts the timer. So that's, in effect, whenever we're moving the tempo slider, you're not going to hear anything. If I stop, I'm still clicked on it, but I stop changing it. But whenever it changes, it's going to stop because the timer of the tempo thing is constantly changing, and it's constantly getting started over again. Now, the reason I do this, there's a good reason. So anyway, like, for example, tempo 2 beats per minute. Each of these will hit twice a minute. Or no, will hit every 15 seconds, rather, because these are eighth notes. So 2 every 30 seconds. So anyway, that's really slow compared to up here, these more normal tempos. So anyway, I'll show you why I did that. And it's kind of, I don't know. You could take or leave it. There's other ways to deal with it, and I'll talk about that just briefly. If I take this out, so I'm commenting that out, so it's no longer being run as part of that function. So I press play, and it's all working fine. I go slow. All of a sudden, I'm waiting. I'm like, where's the sound go? Did it break? No, what's happening is I went all the way down so that the timer is set to 15 seconds. And essentially, our code was stuck right here for 15 seconds because I had the tempo at 2 just momentarily. So that, to me, it really, I would rather, if I want to go tempos that slow, I would rather have that. So let me stop the playback, stop the thing. But anyway, let's actually another way to deal with this is sort of, it's a different way of dealing with it. We go to our tempo slider and we just adjust our minimum value to something within that makes musical sense. So 60 is pretty slow, maybe 50. So at max, you're only waiting a fraction. You're waiting 1 second, I think. Let's see. So I've commented that fix that I have out. So if I play back, so I go down to 50. So you're only waiting like a little more than half a second for each thing to come. So it's still responsive, even if you go low. So that's another way to deal with it. Personally, I think for me personally, I'm just going to have that fix in there and be able to go all the way down so that, if I want to have something really slow in my game, like some generative music that goes just like really slow, like once every minute or once every half minute, some kind of cue happens, that'll happen. And I want to be able to do that. I don't want to limit myself in that way. So, that's just the way it goes. So anyway, that is the little drum machine. Again, I think I'll make one more video because two features I'd like to add are a little sprite that will bounce so that it shows you where it's at in this. This is basically what you would call a sequencer in music production. So a little sprite, like a bouncing ball, that shows you where you're at in the sequence. And then also something that in music production we call choke groups, which is important. But this is a fun little thing. I could do like a Motown beat. Just snare hits on every downbeat. Let's turn it up. You could do sort of the opening of Be My Baby or something like that. So I'll restart that. Doom, 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 doom. Oh, I did that wrong. Doom, 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 doom. So yeah. Other options for this fix is instead of pausing it, basically, whenever the tempo changes, you could do the restart, and then it'll also start from the beginning. So the way I would do that is just like whenever it changes, x equals 0. So now, whenever I change the tempo, let's make it a little. Whenever we change the tempo, it'll start from the beginning. Maybe that's not working perfectly. Anyway, I need to figure out exactly what's happening with that. But that is my little drum machine. I'm going to bring it back to where it was. So if you have any comments or anything, let me know. There's probably better ways to do a lot of this. Like I said, I'll probably do another video with a sprite, and then maybe a third video where instead of using timers, I'll use the frames per second. But I don't know. This sounds kind of solid right now. Yeah, there's a little bit of deviation in the beat. It's not super solid. So, yeah. If anyone has any better ideas, perhaps there's a way to get a bit more solid on this, but it's decent, it's fun, and I'm learning a good amount of stuff from it. All right, thanks for watching.